coming out as well. Mike
He's still around. Dragon's in the game. He's still here. He's got 4 Marines with him. And there's another one pulled in, and it's going to get Neural as well. Instantly shot down. That Harrier not doing a huge amount there, but it's going to be obliterated in the process. And
looks like the Ravens trying to hunt. Actually pointed out the point defense drones. Battle cruisers throwing down the amount of cannons, but here come the Vipers.
Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome to the Major League Gaming Heart of the Swarm show match exhibitions. You'll notice my good companion Alex here, in fact, isn't here. He's missing, but we do have a special guest for you guys. It's going to be John Total Biscuit Bain. We got him on the Skype call right now. John, how you doing?
I'm doing absolutely fantastic. Great to cast some Heart of the Swarm. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be great fun.
So you actually are able to get Crank for us here as well, aren't you?
Yeah, Crank loves Heart of the Swarm. He likes to play that. We actually ran a tournament a little while ago, a little in-house tournament called House of the Swarm. He ended up in the finals, and he's got some interesting HoTS builds, honestly. In fact, you could probably attest to this from a Protoss perspective. TOS has a lot of new tricks available to them in this expansion.
They really do. In fact, on the last King of the Hill, we noticed TT1 was using the trick of just making Void Rays against just about everything, and that worked out pretty well. The latest patch, though, is mixed that up a bit, but I know Crank will have plenty of extra tricks for us.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. He has been playing a little bit of Heart of the Swarm, certainly, and it's currently 7 a.m. over there. He hasn't slept yet, so this is going to be some of his very standard builds that he likes to do when he hasn't slept for about 2 days, so I'm looking forward to it.
Well, you know, he has that advantage of being a world-class Korean player, so maybe he doesn't quite need to sleep quite as much as his opponent, which is going to be Catz for the first game.
Well, Catz has honestly played so much Heart of the Swarm that I would consider him to be a pretty dangerous opponent. That
is true. In fact, he was the first player to actually win prize money on the King of the Hill, taking down 5 matches in a row. TT1 surpassed him, though, winning 6 in a row, so he may be out to try to reclaim his throne of longest streak possible.
Yeah, I can totally do it. I actually remember one of the first HoTS matches I cast was him against Thorzane, and it was an absolutely astonishing match. It really was. Catz was able to utilize the strength of the Zerg to their fullest. But that was a long time ago. That was many patches ago. In fact, one could argue it was an entirely different game. It had different units in it. Warhound was still a thing back then, so who knows what Catz can actually pull out here.
He has a lot of tricks. One thing, he does love to use Vipers as the game goes late. I've noticed that. But I haven't noticed him using them too much in the 1v1s he's been playing. He's been more relying on, it kind of seems like the standard Roach Hydra basic play we saw in the early days of Wings of Liberty. Of course, it's a little bit stronger now with Heart of the Storm with that Hydra to speed upgrade. Yeah,
it's definitely a strong and solid build, whereas some would argue that using Viper and Blinding Cloud, for instance, is not necessarily ideal in all matchups, but you've still got to consider just how powerful it can really be, especially against large Colossus compositions. Being able to yank them out of that is an absolutely huge thing. So we'll see what he decides to use in this matchup. Of course, this will be a Zerg versus Protoss, with Crank playing Protoss, unless he's deciding to off-race today.
You never know. He may feel confident enough. Perhaps he's got to win a couple first, and then he'll decide to switch it up for us.
Yeah, I think that might be a good idea.
Get at least a couple wins. You don't want to go out too early here, especially when he's defending the Korean honor, I guess you could say, up against the. I don't know whether called Catz American or Peruvian. Okay, so we got the players in the game here. Let me just get them their colors set up here. And it's going to be, the first map is Akalong Wastes, which is a pretty cool map. We've seen it a couple times. It really utilizes the rocks that fall over when you kill them. I don't know how to describe those too well. But there's, you guys know what I'm talking about, right? The rocks, when they're on one location, but when you shoot them and blow them up, instead of disappearing, they move, they basically fall over and go to the area next to them.
Collapsible rocks, yes indeed. Also known as Dustin Browder's little babies. Unfortunate, nasty little things, and you can get flattened under them. You want to watch out. I've actually seen entire expansions killed by that, so you do have to be a little bit careful.
Definitely want to knock those out if you're going to construct anything near them before they can crush them. You can see it here on the map load screen, actually, if you can bring that up on the camera for you guys, where it has a little green icon on the load screen is exactly where those collapsible rocks occur. just put at third base. So you have to kill your own rocks first to get access to that third base, and then you can knock down those collapsible rocks.
That you do indeed. All right, Akalon Wastes will be the venue for today's encounter between this fellow down to the southeast. He uses the ID Root No Cancer, which is always a good way to be. It is, of course, Root Catz from Team Root, and he is in the Blue Trunks playing Zerg to the southeast. His opponent to the northwest, all the way from Korea, it's currently 7 a.m. over there. He has yet to sleep because all he requires to live is, in fact, STARCRAFT 2. Playing Protoss to the northwest, it is Axiom Crank.
And that is a scary opponent, one who lives, breathes, and eats STARCRAFT 2. He's already exploring the map. Got that probe out there. This is a pretty early scout, but I think it's great against a player like Catz, because Catz loves to go hatchery first, and that's going to be a little bit more difficult once the probe gets to that natural location and blocks it.
Yeah, not only that, but he likes to go hatchery first in his opponent's main, so something to consider. Got to watch out for that kind of thing. He became a legend for the proxy hatch play, and really being one of the only people that could actually actively pull it off. But you're right, I mean, that is an early scout on a fairly small map, so there could be shenanigans in play. We do have Pylon down on the lower ground here. He has yet to put down a forge, but of course 13 would be a little bit early for that. So he scouts to check that there's no nonsense going on, sees that, oh, it's going to be a hatchery before pool, so I mean, he could safely go Nexus here. In fact, it looks like he very well might, and just go Nexus before Forge.
He definitely could. The only thing that would throw that in loop is if Catz decides to his proxy hatchery build, the drone is actually heading towards the Nexus location. He's got the money. Oh no, nope. he just built the hatchery to natural. So decided to do the hatch first. The more standard hatchery first play, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I'm not sure a proxy hatch would work in a kind of scenario where the Protoss is most likely going to build a forge pretty quickly and has a pylon already right next to it just to cannon the thing. So I don't necessarily think that's a good idea. But he has actually significantly delayed this expansion, at least by about 10 seconds. Admittedly, the Forge follow is going to come immediately here on about 17 or 18 supply. Interesting, second pylon going down right there because he realizes, well, I really want to push my probe production, especially considering the delay, so let's get that down before the Forge. I know he's going to hatchery first. There's nothing coming my way yet. In fact, there's not even a pool down yet, and it's 17. In fact, we are seeing the 3 hatchery before pool. Nice and greedy here from Catz.
One thing I've actually seen Catz do in Heart of the Swarm is he sometimes will go 4 hatchery before pool. Crank actually may know his tendency to do this. Double gateway, no forge. I really love this reaction by Crank.
That's nice. That really is. I mean, usually you'd expect it to go for more passive play here, especially considering the Overlord's right there. But yeah, 2 gateways going right down. The spawning pool is like on about 20, which is super late. And there's all sorts of possibilities for aggression here. This can also very much turn into one of Crank's favorite signature builds, which is the 4 gateway blink mothership build, which is a really nasty build. And it got to the point, actually, where Blizzard had to nerf it a little bit, but it's still very potent.
Yeah, they kicked the blink time down by about, they delayed it by 30 seconds, I believe, so instead of 140 seconds, now it's 170?
Yeah, that's exactly what they did.
So, I mean, that does make it hit slower, but it still is going to hit. In fact, the later it hits, it means the more stalkers still have. And Crank is one of those players with just absolutely amazing blink micro. So he could definitely follow up the Zell pressure with that. Another thing, I've seen some Protoss have been really liking to use the Oracles early on, especially against Zerg. Do you think he might use Zealots to distract Catz? And then while Catz is trying to deal with those, that'll cover him to get the Oracles and maybe catch Catz without any Spore Callers or any defense?
It's entirely possible. Crank does tend to go for airplay an awful lot in Wings of Liberty, and I have seen him use it in Heart of the Swarm, but less so than you might expect. And you'd think that a guy that uses a lot of Phoenix in the PvZ matchup would really adore the idea of being able to play air more viably past the early game, but Crank actually doesn't most of the time. The thing is that he's still dipping into different strategies and trying out different things, so you never know. It's always a possibility.
It definitely is. Crank, of course, Crank has plenty of options in his repertoire there.
Well, we'll see what comes of that shortly. Mothership Core is coming in here. There's a Stargate, as you know, you accurately called it. Now, that could be for Oracles, it could be for Phoenix, it could be a mix of both. Could still be for Void Rays. I believe the recent patch did make a slight change to the new Void Ray Prismatic Alignment ability, though.
It did. Basically, all the facts is that your opponent is going to know exactly when the timer is going to go off on that because they can see how long it has, which gives them the ability to make a more informed choice about whether to engage you or not. If it's like 2 seconds before it fades away, then you're going to say, okay, maybe I'll just wait for that ability to go away before I end up engaging him. And if it's, you know, still a full, I think it's 6 seconds from the start, something like that.
Yeah.
Or no, it's 10 seconds. It's 6 damage for 10 seconds. Then, of course, they just say, you know what? 10 seconds means I'll lose my whole base if I wait, so let's not do that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting move, actually, from Blizzard to implement something like that, because it's the way that they've done it completely redesigns the way that the unit can be used. And it's not really a clear buff or nerf, it's just kind of a role change. And I think what they've managed to do there is potentially make Void Rays more viable in more situations, which is always good. The last thing you want is a unit that only really works about 5% of the time, because it's just a wasted spot, which is actually what Terran were really feeling about Reapers since the latest change. But you know, they've just buffed the health on those things, so they may still be viable in certain circumstances. Now, we've got Catz knocking on the door here with a couple of Roaches and Lings. An Oracle is on its way. We've got the Rocks up to the 3rd about to go down here as well, with the Mothership Core trying to deal with the Zerglings that are scouting around the place. But so far, Catz has managed to hold on to 3 bases and hasn't taken too much damage, and he's already up to about 52 drones.
He is. You know, he hasn't taken any direct damage, but I think it's important to note how early he had to build that Roach Warren because of Crank's 2-gate opening.
Yes.
And so he's taken a lot of, I guess you could say, indirect damage, and the fact that I think a Zerg would like to have more than, you know, 50 drones at the 9-minute mark. They'd really like to be at 65 or so. But, you know, Crank's build has really prevented Catz from being able to drone up as much as he'd like to.
Yeah, I mean, that's a perfect assessment of it as far as I'm concerned. It is that indirect damage, and it's less obvious than the fact that you can have 6 Zealots in your mineral line just chopping drones into pieces, but it has slowed him down. I mean, let's be honest, a Zerg that goes 3 hatch before pool doesn't want to be building a Roach Warren that early. That's not the point. That's not why they did it. They really wanted that economic edge. Now we've got 3 Oracles moving down the bottom right here, and we'll see how much damage they are actually able to inflict. Wow, the starport's actually so well hidden, I couldn't even find it. And funnily enough, you know what? Neither could Catz. Catz has not seen this. He did not spot the Stargate at all.
He has no idea, no Spore Cores. He does have a few Hydroists out, but they're not going to be positioned to deal with defending his main base as these Oracles are about to come in here, and they just instantly evaporate drones.
Yes, they do. He is going to work on that, and instantly Catz pulling off the mineral line there. Pretty solid play. Whoa, he's got to be careful. He actually missed micros there and loses an Oracle, so nice solid defense there by Catz. Going to make his way down to the natural, maybe blast away at that. In fact, actually going for the 3rd is the smartest play here, I feel, and that's exactly what he's doing, because the Hydras were moving to defend the natural. He ended up bypassing that and going straight for the 3rd. Anyway, takes down a few more. We've got an Oracle there with 7 kills, another one with 3, so that's pretty good. Doesn't want to lose that one. And he does, so that's, you know, that's not the best trade. I mean, he did take a lot of workers down. He's killed 12 in total, but he did lose 2 Oracles for it, and they're fairly gas heavy.
They are. I think they're 150 gas and either 100 or 150 minerals. You can check right here, actually. 150, 150. So I would say that maybe was a slight favor towards Catz.
Yes.
Resources lost roughly equal, but of course, you know, there was the fact that Crank really put his tech into this direction. And so, you know, because he did that, he doesn't really have those robotics units out yet. Just now the double robos are finishing. And he doesn't have, you know, Storm or any other powerful tool at his disposal.
Yeah, and if a large, massive Zerg unit suddenly comes knocking on his door and he has to deal with it using only gateway units, it's going to be in trouble. I mean, Hydralisks trade very, very well, for the most part, with gateway units. It really depends on how many Guardian Shields you see up, honestly, and whether or not they can maintain a Guardian Shield. Obviously, they don't stack, but you want to be able to cover everything with the Guardian Shield, because Hydralisks, being a fast-firing unit, tend to suffer the most when they have a flat -2 damage going in there. But there's an interesting addition here of the drop capability for Zerg. And we are going to, by the looks of it, see a pure Hydralisk drop coming in.
Does he have the... He does have the overlord speed, and drop is almost finished.
Yes. Yep.
Hydralisk drop can be very powerful if you get them all out and inside the Protoss space, because any units that the Protoss has have to weave between their own buildings to get back to defend.
Yep.
If Crank can figure it out, though, and basically camp the spot where the Hydralisk drop wants to occur, then there's really no way Catz can get in there and get those units unloaded in an efficient manner.
Yeah, the other problem that Catz is going to have is that his upgrade count compared to Crank's is not very good at all. He's only really just started +1. He hasn't got +1 armor. Crank's working on +3 attack. So he's been powering those upgrades out from the very start. So with a large Stalker count, as well as a bunch of sentries and 2 Colossus about to pop with extended thermal lance, I don't know how effective this is necessarily going to be here, but it will be quite unexpected. This is not scouted. There is an observer on the field, but it is nowhere near where it needs to be to spot this.
Crank's actually moving out, too, which could prove disastrous if he gets caught way out on the map. I mean, you mentioned Colossi, though, and they're going to be basically mean the Hydralisk cannot fight Crank in a straight-up engagement, at least until Catz gets an answer to them. We can see he's going Hive Tech already. Maybe he plans to use the Vipers as a counter if he can yank those Colossi into his Hydralisk army.
Yeah, Viper Hydra is a really good composition for that very, very reason. You can pull the Colossus out, and then the DPS of the Hydralisk is so immense that they can take down Colossus almost instantly. Now, I don't like this move from Krang, of course, because he's moving out, but how could he possibly know what's coming in? He is about to get hit on his third, although he is actually pulling back now with, looks like a small Ling attack on the front here is going to encourage those units to come back. It is actually a distraction because a massive Hydralisk drop is coming in. This could very easily snipe the Nexus.
There's no blink either, so Catz will have a pretty easy way to escape, only losing a few Overlords if he wants to pick up and run away. Dropping a few Hydras here isn't enough to finish off this Nexus. It looks like it is because Crank's going to prioritize defending his main base, as a drop there is probably a greater threat.
Yeah, well, that's going to be cleaned up very, very quickly with pretty much no damage taken. But actually, Crank has gone for both, in fact. And it looks like he's going to be able to hold both the bases. We've got that Nexus down there. That just got completely shut down. Uh-oh. Those Overlords are in a really bad position. Hydralisks are going to fall from the sky here. He's already lost several. Another smaller Hydra drop comes in, but the Photon Overcharge is applied to the third base to defend that. And Crank holds all three bases.
Some great multitasking there. I thought that third base was doomed for sure, but he pulled a whole extra crew of units out of somewhere, and barely was able to save the Nexus, giving himself a huge food advantage. And not only that, but he's got higher quality units, I think it's safe to say, at least right now. I mean, we can see Catz moving for the Ultras Cavern could change things up a bit.
Well, man, that was so intense for Crank. Notice those two gateways he built. He didn't even have time to turn them into warp gates. They still aren't. They're just sitting there as gateways because he was concentrating on defending that. And we've got a warping coming in, and that Hydra drop is proving pretty ineffective. What I want to look at is how much damage was done, though. This is the untold story. 23 workers were killed, and it looks like some more are going to get killed with the Zergling drop coming in, although maybe not too many. So some damage was definitely done, but probably not enough to pay for that attack.
I would definitely say not. I mean, as far as resources lost, we can see here, you know, Catz is far in the negative in that regard. But it has put Crank on a defensive, which brings to the question, as the game goes on, who does it favor? I mean, Crank's built up his, like, Doom Deathball army, but has Catz bought enough time to get a counter to it? He thinks the Ultras are going to be his counter. We'll have to see if they're going to be enough to stop this or not, because he's still down by 30 food.
I don't think it is, and there's a couple of reasons. One, Blink. Two, upgrades. We're looking at 3-0 versus currently 1-1 Ultralisks that don't have Chitinous plating up yet. And they're not going to have it by the time this ball hits, which is extremely concerning. So we will see how this works out, but this is going to be a tough defense here for Catz.
Look at all those hallucinations. Interesting choice to use the Colossi. I get, that makes a lot of sense against the Vipers. Against Ultras, I would have rather seen, you know, Zealots, but of course I think he was anticipating Corruptors or Vipers when he made this push.
Oh, it actually makes super sense against Ultras when you think about it, because hallucinations can still block access to the real ones. So if you've got melee heavy units, then it doesn't matter if they're not doing any damage, though it's a wall. He's just created a wall out of nowhere, and while this is clearly not 20 actual Colossus, that attack was pretty effective here for Crank. He obliterates all 9 Ultralisks and is now moving into the Hive.
Yeah, I think he kept 100% of his own Colossi, the real ones, alive during that battle. And Catz is remaking Hydralisk. That's not going to work against this type of Colossi count.
No, it won't. Those Hydras will die in about 2 seconds. As you can see, they're being obliterated from all sides. Drones coming off the line. GG. And there you go. Crank takes his first win in the King of the Hill.
Wow, a great game there by Crank. You know, so far we've seen Protoss has done fairly well in our Hardest Room exhibition matches. Of course, there was a show match between Seed and Supernova yesterday. If you guys want to check that out, go to youtube.com/official MLGSC2. And Crank's kind of keeping that going right now. With that first victory over Catz. Who do you think? Do you think anyone we can bring is going to be to take down Crank?
I think so. I mean, the format that we have here is a best of one, right? It's King of the Hill, so there's all sorts of possibilities. So I think that you can pull out pretty much anything against Crank here, and you could very well catch him off guard. It doesn't matter how good your player is. if you are still in a best-of-1 format in a game that you're not 100% familiar with. It all comes down more so to mind games, as cliche as it sounds, than anything else. So I absolutely think there's all sorts of people that could definitely take Crank down in this, but that was a pretty strong start. I mean, Catz is experienced in Heart of the Swarm. He's a great player. He played really well initially, and his plan was good, but for some, I don't even know how, we had that three-pronged harassment shut down on all three sides.
The usage of that photon overcharge seemed to be very effective, because if that fourth Nexus died, that could have been the extra edge Catz needed to make that harassment worth it. But Crank really, the way he split up his army, so he sent most of it to the main, where he thought the greatest threat was, just enough to hold the third, but he left his Mothership Core back. A lot of players would have brought that with the army, but he's like, no, I should keep it in case there's some further speeding run by or whatever it's going to be at my other bases, and that paid off in spades for him.
Yeah, I think that the players are probably going to start to realize sooner rather than later that bringing the Mothership Core with the army is not necessarily the best idea, because it makes recall pretty much useless. What you want is the ability to pull your entire army back and also have the ability to photon overcharge. I mean, think about it. The three abilities that the Mothership Core has, two of them are useless if you're away from your base, essentially. So even though it seems like a good idea initially, and a lot of players did do that, I think some of them are starting to come around to the idea that it is more of a caution unit that you really shouldn't necessarily take away from your base too often.
It definitely isn't. Crank used it well there. If you guys want a chance to fight against Crank and try to overthrow him from being the king of the hill, if you're a professional player or a grandmaster player and you think you have a shot against him, join channel MLG on the Heart of the Swarm beta. We're going to take a quick break and then be right back with our next match, Crank against a new challenger. See you guys in a minute.